Brentuximab vedotin was one of the biggest breakthroughs in the management of Hodgkin lymphoma to come along when it was first developed several years ago. This is a novel approach to treating any type of cancer, and it was one of the first of its type to be approved for any indication. Brentuximab vedotin is an antibody-drug conjugate that targets CD30 and delivers a chemotherapy payload, and it was initially approved for relapsed Hodgkin lymphoma to be used as a monotherapy. Subsequently, it has now been evaluated in the frontline setting based on its success in the relapsed setting. And after a series of studies that showed that it could be safely combined with AVD, there was a large randomized clinical trial which compared BV-AVD with the standard ABVD for 6 cycles. So regardless of whether a patient receives brentuximab vedotin in the front line, it clearly is a very active agent in Hodgkin lymphoma and was a huge advance for our field. The consideration of BV-AVD for frontline therapy is a real challenging decision. As you may know, there have been a number of controversies regarding whether or not it's the most appropriate therapy at this point. One of the challenges with the clinical trial that led to its approval was that the comparator arm was ABVD for 6 cycles, which now most people would agree is no longer the standard of care. Having said all of that, this, I think, is still a very effective regimen, and I still consider it for my patients with advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma. Typically, I'll have a discussion with the patients about the pros and cons of each approach, the PET-adapted approach versus BV-AVD, and work with them to make a decision that's right for them. The easiest decision with regards to frontline therapy is with those patients that have underlying lung disease, or perhaps those that are smokers and unable to quit smoking, or for whom you're very concerned about the toxicity from bleomycin. Patients that have underlying lung disease that have poor PFTs, or that are smokers, or have some other undue risk associated with the bleomycin, I will typically always steer towards BV-AVD. The other group that appears to potentially be more likely to benefit from the brentuximab vedotin as part of the frontline approach are those patients with more high-risk features. And although this was a subset analysis of the larger study that was conducted, it does appear that those were the patients that may benefit the most from incorporation of brentuximab vedotin in the upfront setting. I think that otherwise it's an open debate regarding which approach is the most appropriate, and again, I typically will have a discussion with patients about the pros and cons of each approach. Fortunately, most patients who receive combination chemotherapy and who achieve a complete remission will stay in remission and potentially be cured. And in some of the initial or some of the prior studies looking at ABVD, that number was about 75%. In the BV-AVD study, that number now is above 80%, and it's probably even higher for those patients that truly do achieve a complete remission. And so although we didn't see that in this particular case, most patients that I take care of that achieve a complete remission with standard combination therapy will be cured of their disease.